In a world that feels increasingly loud, fast, and demanding, Carl Rogers' voice sounds almost radical in its calm. He spoke at a time before smartphones, before constant notifications, before productivity culture turned rest into a guilty pleasure. And yet, his ideas feel uncannily suited to our present moment, perhaps because the core problem he identified has only intensified. We have learned to live disconnected from ourselves. Modern stress is not just about doing too much. It is about constantly monitoring who we are while we do it. Am I good enough? Am I behind? Am I doing this right? Rogers understood that when self-evaluation becomes relentless, life stops feeling like something we inhabit and starts feeling like something we manage. Ease disappears, not because life is hard, but because we are never at rest inside it. Carl Rogers believed that human beings have an inherent tendency toward growth, balance, and meaning. He called this the actualizing tendency. It is not something we create. It is something already operating within us. Like breathing, it works best when it is not interfered with. Stress, in this sense, is not always caused by external pressure, but by internal obstruction. Today, many people live in a state of chronic inner tension. Even moments of rest are invaded by mental noise. The phone is silent, but the mind is not. Rogers would say that this tension arises when our lived experience conflicts with our self-concept. In simpler terms, when who we feel ourselves to be clashes with who we think we are supposed to be. The fully functioning person, in Rogers' view, is not someone who has eliminated stress, but someone who is no longer at war with their own experience. They feel stress without immediately pathologizing it. They notice fatigue without turning it into self-criticism. They listen to discomfort instead of numbing it. This alone changes the quality of daily life. Modern culture teaches us to override our internal signals, push through exhaustion, ignore boredom, suppress doubt, perform confidence. Over time, we lose trust in our own inner compass. Rogers saw this as a profound loss. When we stop trusting our organism, we become dependent on external validation, metrics, and approval to tell us who we are. The result is a particular kind of stress that feels vague but constant. Not panic, not crisis, but a low-grade unease, a feeling of being slightly out of sync with one's own life. The fully functioning person moves in the opposite direction. They cultivate sensitivity rather than toughness, awareness rather than control. Rogers placed enormous importance on congruence. Congruence means that what you feel inside, what you are aware of, and how you present yourself to the world are aligned. In modern terms, it means you are not constantly editing yourself. This editing is exhausting. It is one of the most underestimated sources of burnout today. Think about how often people smile while feeling depleted, say yes while feeling resentful, or claim they are fine while quietly unraveling. These small daily acts of incongruence accumulate. Over time, they create a sense of inner fragmentation. Life becomes harder not because of circumstances, but because we are divided against ourselves. An easy life, from a Rogerian perspective, is a life with fewer internal contradictions. It does not require perfect choices, only honest ones. When your actions reflect your inner reality, even difficult paths feel cleaner, less draining. When they do not, even success feels strangely heavy. Rogers also spoke about conditions of worth, a concept that feels painfully relevant today. Conditions of worth are the implicit rules that say, you are acceptable if you perform, if you succeed, if you are productive, if you are likable, if you are strong. Social media has turned these conditions into a public scoreboard. Under constant comparison, people learn to relate to themselves as brands rather than as living organisms. Stress becomes identity-based. You are not just tired, you are failing. You are not just uncertain, you are falling behind. Rogers would say that this is not a personal weakness but a relational injury. The fully functioning person gradually loosens the grip of these conditions, not by rebelling dramatically, but by listening inwardly. They begin to ask quieter questions. What feels true right now? What actually matters to me, not to the algorithm, not to the timeline, not to other people's expectations? This inward listening is not indulgence. It is maintenance. Just as the body needs rest, the psyche needs permission to be honest. Without that permission, stress accumulates silently. It shows up as irritability, numbness, chronic dissatisfaction. Rogers understood that mental health is less about techniques and more about relationships, especially the relationship with oneself. Unconditional positive regard is perhaps Rogers' most famous idea. It means valuing a person without conditions. Applied inwardly, it becomes self-acceptance, not approval of everything, but a refusal to withdraw worth from oneself. In modern life, where self-worth is constantly negotiated, this is deeply stabilizing. When people experience self-acceptance, they paradoxically become more capable of change. Stress decreases because energy is no longer spent on self-surveillance. Growth happens organically. The fully functioning person does not force improvement. They allow understanding to transform behavior. Rogers believed that emotions are not obstacles to reason, but guides to meaning. Modern stress often involves emotional suppression. Stay positive. Don't dwell. Move on. But unacknowledged emotions do not disappear. They convert into tension. The fully functioning person allows emotions to be felt fully and then to pass. This emotional openness makes life more vivid. Sadness is deeper, but so is joy. Anxiety is present, but it is not catastrophic. There is resilience not because emotions are controlled, but because they are trusted. This trust reduces fear of inner experience, which is a major component of modern anxiety. Another key aspect of being fully functioning is openness to experience. This means allowing reality to be what it is, rather than forcing it to fit expectations. Much modern stress comes from fighting reality, fighting aging, fighting limits, fighting uncertainty. The more rigid the expectations, the greater the stress. The fully functioning person is flexible. They adapt not by hardening, but by softening. They revise their self-image when life demands it. They allow themselves to change direction. In a world obsessed with consistency and personal branding, this flexibility is quietly revolutionary. Rogers spoke of trusting the organism. This is not impulsivity, but attunement. It means listening to subtle signals, fatigue, excitement, resistance, curiosity. Modern stress often comes from ignoring these signals in favor of schedules, goals, and external demands. When people stop trusting themselves, decisions become overwhelming. Every choice feels risky. The fully functioning person still experiences doubt, but they are not paralyzed by it. They accept uncertainty as part of living. This acceptance reduces cognitive overload, a major contributor to modern exhaustion. Presence is another hallmark of full functioning. The person is engaged with the present moment, not because they are enlightened, but because they are not constantly escaping it. Modern stress thrives on future obsession and past rumination. Presence interrupts this loop. Being present does not mean being calm all the time. It means being real. Fully functioning people feel frustration while working, grief while losing, boredom while waiting. But they do not add layers of judgment to these states. This simplicity makes life lighter. Rogers also emphasized creativity as a natural outcome of psychological health. Creativity here is not artistic output, but adaptive living, the ability to respond freshly rather than habitually. Modern stress often traps people in rigid patterns. Creativity restores movement. Relationships also transform when one becomes more fully functioning. Communication becomes clearer. Boundaries become firmer without becoming harsh. There is less performance and more presence. This reduces relational stress, which is one of the most draining forms of modern pressure. Rogers never promised happiness as a permanent state. He promised aliveness. The fully functioning person feels life fully, without excessive defense. This aliveness includes discomfort, but it is honest discomfort, not manufactured suffering. Importantly, this way of living is not achieved once and for all. It is a process. Some days you are open, other days you are guarded. Ease comes from allowing this fluctuation rather than demanding perfection. Modern stress often comes from expecting constant optimization. In a culture that treats life as a project, Rogers invites us to treat it as a process, something lived, not mastered, something listened to, not conquered. This shift alone can significantly reduce inner tension. The easy life is not passive. It is responsive. It does not eliminate effort, but it removes unnecessary resistance. It is a life where energy flows toward what matters, rather than being drained by self-conflict. Carl Rogers trusted that when people feel safe enough to be themselves, they naturally move toward balance. Perhaps the most radical act today is to create that safety within ourselves, to stop treating stress as a personal failure and start seeing it as information. To become more fully functioning is not to escape modern life, but to inhabit it more honestly. It is to live with fewer masks, fewer inner arguments, fewer silent betrayals of self. And in that honesty, life often becomes not easier in appearance, but simpler in experience. And sometimes, simplicity is the deepest form of ease. So this is another secret to an easy life.